have this for others. Uh, we have a very exciting agenda ahead. So if you go to this slide, you'll see that we are going to have a welcome, so you get to know the speakers. We're going to go through a snapshot of the Master of Liberal Arts. We're going to talk about the learning journey ahead, and then we'll go through the timeline and details. And most of all, we will save about 20 minutes for question and answer. And so, as you can see, I am one of the people that you'll be hearing from. I'm Seth Green, the dean here at the Graham School, and I consider the Master of Liberal Arts to be one of the true jewels of our school, and dare I say at the university, because as you'll hear, you get to see across the entirety of the university's disciplines over this program. And with that, I'll invite my colleague Tim to introduce himself. Tim, who are you?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tim Murphy. I serve as director of the Master Liberal Arts program here at the Graham School, and I'm looking forward to getting into some of the details about our program in a couple minutes.
Wonderful. And one of our recent graduates is here to share her story. Beth, you want to tell a little bit about your background?
Great. Yes, I graduated from the program in 2024 and came out of a background with an MBA and am now serving kind of back in the corporate world. I says consultant here, but as Vice President of Investor Relations at a public company, Phoenix Education Partners, and excited to tell you a little bit about my experience and journey through the program.
Thanks, Beth. And we'll get that updated in the future.
Oh, I just saw a new.
Congratulations.
I'll get you new.
And Carrie, tell us about who you are.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carrie Dempsey. I'm the Director of Recruitment for the Master of Liberal Arts program. Many of you have likely already spoken with Tom Shannon, who's on my team. He's our enrollment counselor, and Tom and I are here to support you throughout the application process, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later during this conversation.
Wonderful. Well, with that, I will jump into the MLA spotlight, and we're going to be coming back to Beth and Tim, especially throughout this webinar. And let me start with what you already know. This is a program designed to help you grow as a leader, as a problem solver, and as a communicator through advanced study in the liberal arts. And there's really a very clear context behind why we believe this is such a valuable graduate education program. And it is that it really is a way to see through complexity. The way that we often talk about a liberal arts education is that it gives you the chance to look through many different lenses at big issues and big questions in the world. And especially as our world becomes more complex and dynamic, with artificial intelligence further disrupting the possibility set, the MLA gives you a really foundational toolkit about how to think critically, creatively, and synthetically to fuel both your personal growth as an individual as well as your professional growth, especially in mid and later career. And so sometimes the way we describe the MLA is as a cognitive boot camp, where what you're really doing is you're going through all of these different disciplines from the biological and natural sciences over to the social sciences and humanities to really allow yourself to think more critically, to write in even more precise and dynamic ways, and to adapt in your leadership. And as you'll hear about, alongside being able to study across the university, you also have a chance to specialize. And we have three concentrations: ethics and leadership, literary studies, and tech and society, which I'll talk a little bit more about. And most, maybe of all, what people really value is a chance to join a really dynamic group of accomplished peers who are committed to this type of life of the mind together. In terms of who is in the MLA, it's worth saying a little bit about our population because it is distinct in higher education. This is typically a degree for experienced individuals and leaders. So about 60% of the people that are a part of the program actually already hold a graduate degree when they join us. Beth is actually representative of the most common graduate degree, the MBA, then the JD and MD, and then many other forms of graduate degree. In terms of where, because this is a degree where there are in-person opportunities, as we'll talk about, but it's primarily online, more than 65% now are individuals that reside outside of our area. And we're fortunate to have an international population for the degree, which really adds to the diversity in the classroom. And the average person is in about a 20-year professional trajectory. So, somewhere mid 40s to mid 50s and far into their professional leadership, about a third holding specific executive leadership roles within their corporation or their institution. In terms of what makes our individuals tick, what we find is that students in the MLA, most of all, are curious. They really want to explore topics because they want to better understand the world. They are rigorous. They love the university's commitment to really argument-based thinking. They're innovative. They enjoy writing and thinking that is kind of pushing the frontiers. And then we're fortunate we have a very collaborative community. So you're often working on projects and you're in a seminar setting where you're in joint inquiry. And we mean that literally. You are solving big questions together as a team, trying to think about texts and about big ideas in society. But rather than me tell you all about this, we have two experts in the room. And so this time I'm going to actually stop sharing my screen and I'm going to bring Beth and Tim up so that we can see them. And Beth, let me start with you. Can you talk about what motivated you to join the MLA? And maybe now that you have actually graduated from it, can you talk about whether it was actually complementary to your MBA, which you had prior to joining us?
Yeah, definitely. And I actually have a little bit of stepping back a bit from it, having graduated in 2024. I have some good perspective on it because at that period I was in a transition, and it was, to be honest, the best part of it, provided, which I'll talk more about the process and what included, but it really expanded my critical thinking. And during that period, I was doing consulting and doing a lot of different things and really exploring of what to do next. And I ended up going back into as I mentioned, and back into the corporate world. So beyond taking my MBA and having kind of the functional experience of the MBA throughout my career, it really brought me to a whole nother level of thinking. And from that, have even more taken it to, because to your point of the slide that just was up, is exactly 100% the curiosity being part of the conversation and looking at things in a new way. And that's where now that I've gone back into the corporate world, it's, taking that and it's, supporting that and augmenting that, but the longer term of kind of as lifespan increases, how to continue to learn and feed that love of learning. So as we get into some of the kind of classwork discussion, I can tell you more about how that process works, but it was really just an anchor part of the kind of a next step process in my life.
Well, and Tim, you've seen now hundreds of MLA students because we've been fortunate to have you first as assistant director, now as director for a decade as part of the program. And so can you talk about, maybe different reasons that students pursue the MBA? Obviously, Beth is one example, but, you've probably seen enough now to kind of have themes or categories that are really motivating different student bodies.
Certainly, I could speak to a couple different categories or sort of buckets of students and the common motivations in there. One would be people who work in tech or tech adjacent fields. A couple of our current students are product managers at Microsoft. I think three now zoom in from the West Coast. They work at Google. And unsurprisingly, these types of students pursue our tech and society concentration and appreciate taking a liberal arts lens to think new ways about the technologies they deal with at work. And by virtue of their careers, they've already kind of mastered the how of technology. But they'll say sort of in their candidate statements in the application that they want to pursue the MLA to acquire new perspectives and enable them to step back and instead of asking the how questions, ask the bigger questions like the why questions of other technologies. Beth spoke to this next category a little bit, but another bucket of students I would maybe label as business leaders or aspiring business leaders. I think you mentioned in your opening remarks that a large segment of our students already have an MBA degree, and they're coming to us a few decades into an accomplished business career. And they are pursuing the MLA at this juncture in their life to sort of also take a step back and think about their leadership in new ways and use the MLA degree to try and catapult their leadership to the next level in the last decade or decade and a half of their career. And unsurprisingly, they gravitate toward our ethics and leadership concentration. Another one would be communication roles, people that work in marketing or creative writing. And these students are already strong writers when they come to us, but they're looking to further hone their craft in our literary studies classes, reading great works and writing long papers about those great works. And I would also just be remiss if I didn't add that not all of our students are coming with a career-specific kind of motivation. A consistently large number of our students are retirement age or close to retirement age, or otherwise are just applying for the level of learning. We'll call them sort of the lifelong learners, and they're very much welcome in the MLA as well.
Well, so Beth, I want to come back to you and talk about the value of a degree like this one. And I'm curious for you, you've been in C-suite roles. You've then held a consulting role where you were advising a lot of executives. Now you're back in the C-suite. Can you talk about maybe broadly what you see as the value of a liberal arts education like this one for you? But then also talk about how it's actually influenced you professionally as well as personally.
Absolutely. And I think your comment about the life of the mind, Seth, about how how it really kind of sharpens your ability to think.
Yeah.
And the way that the classes are set up are a kind of a Socratic approach, and sometimes you're going into topics that and deep reading and thinking and topics that you didn't know about before in a new way. I mean, when you're in a work setting, you're kind of in a get it done kind of mode and process and meetings and all that. I think what it brings back to the work setting or consulting, whatever side of it, or just interacting with people in general, not just in work, but is an ability to look at things more critically or deeply. And the curiosity is an important part of it, where you're not just taking things at face value. You really, it really, it changes the way you think. And I had the same experience when I got my MBA in a different way. But this is just, I think, expanding out your brain is a way to put it, I guess, and not just and also it fuels the side of you that looks at things and you're interested in it, and knowing that you can really jump in and do that. I think that's the process, and I did it pretty quickly. I went through the program, I think, like in a year and a half, 2 years, which I know that's not maybe not the norm, but I don't know if that is the norm. Tim can talk, Seth can talk to that, but is it? It just made me realize you hadn't been back to school, and that just I think just using your brain is a good thing too, and bringing it to the work setting, just your interaction with people and how you communicate. I think that also in the writing that Tim mentioned as well.
Well, so Tim, can I come to you on this? Because here again, we have a great example, but I'm curious across a broad group of students, how have you seen individuals grow in the MLA? What value have you seen them receive?
Well, maybe the easy answer is they all leave the program as deeper thinkers, more expansive thinkers, and better writers. That's for sure. But a more unexpected answer might be to speak to the confidence students gain in the program. And I say unexpected because, as we saw a few slides ago, many of our students already have noteworthy professional accomplishments. And while that's true, it can still be a little intimidating if you haven't been in school for a number of years to have your return to the classroom be at a place like the University of Chicago. But as these students go through the program, they develop this confidence that I'm speaking to. And it's always rewarding from my perspective to see students who were maybe a little bit nervous in the very beginning of the program, taking their first humanities class or something. To watch those students thrive and then see them very eager and be the first ones to sign up for an astrophysics class or neurobiology 3 or 4 quarters down the road. And I think with that confidence also comes, I mentioned sort of expansive thinking and being made to take courses in areas outside their comfort zone. There was a student who graduated, I think 2 years ago, who was a like an executive in the home healthcare industry. And for his master's thesis project, he wound up doing a collection of poetry, and he got a very good grade on it. The professor thought they were very sensitive and wonderful poems, and that's certainly something he would never have thought was in him when he was starting the program, but discovered it along the way.
Well, we're going to come back to Tim and Beth throughout this discussion, but I want to raise my screen again because I want to talk about the specifics of the learning journey now, which are ahead. So let's jump in. So if we think about the curriculum for the Master of Liberal Arts, there are 9 courses. And as you see at the top, the first part of the degree is that you take a course in each of the 4 divisions of the university. And so it's a way to really see into what we consider to be all of the lenses, all of the different ways of investigating knowledge, the humanities, the social sciences, the biological sciences, and the physical sciences. Now, importantly, the sciences are taught for a generally educated, intelligent, but non-expert audience. They are taught by our tenured faculty members, and they are taught using the same academic journal articles and depth, but they are specifically accommodative for students that don't have the prerequisite background. So as an example, in a class on climate science, you will investigate that deeply with a climatologist. You will read academic journal pieces, but you will not be expected when it gets into some of the more quantitative pieces to have any quantitative knowledge or those pieces. And what often is motivating the faculty in the sciences is that many of them are working on, for example, books for a trade press, and they actually really want to work with you as part of the class to figure out how do they bring this expert knowledge and depth to a generally educated audience. And so it's been a wonderful part of our process that we are able to bring very deep knowledge and expert to people that may not have that background. You come out with that opportunity to really know across the university. Then you take up to 4 electives, 3 of which, as we'll talk about, if you designate in a certain area, you can then get a concentration. And I'll go into that in a moment. And then finally, you have a capstone. And that capstone is one of your own making. And it is with an academic advisor. And it's typically answering a question that really is meaningful to you academically or personally. And that you take a very rigorous approach to using the tools that you've built over the first 8 courses around research-based writing. So let's jump in. If you use those electives that you have in that middle silver category, and you put them into one of these 3 areas, then you can have a concentration. And so those concentrations include ethics and leadership, where you're really looking at how people across time and space have answered big questions of leadership. This is a bit different than the leadership that you might do at Booth, which is more oriented toward a very specific type of operational leadership within a business. Ours is more looking at humanistic leadership. So you'll look at how the Stoics and how different cultures and how different societies have thought about, promoted, looked at leadership and its intersection with ethical behavior. In literary studies, you will be able to read some of the greatest books of all time and go deep into honing your own writing skills. And then in tech and society, you're really going to be looking at how ideas across time and space intersect with this moment that we have of major technological disruption and advancement. Then we've had really interesting courses, a philosopher looking at issues of privacy philosophically with philosophers from the 17th and 18th centuries, but then having that interact and engage and exchange ideas with what is Apple doing today versus others, and how does that relate to longstanding philosophical traditions of private ownership and privacy in the context of a world where obviously everything has changed because the ability to record data and hold on to it is in such a different place. So those are the 3 concentrations. You can study as fits your focus, or you could go across them, but that would mean you wouldn't receive a formal concentration. In terms of the thesis, I think these give you a good idea of the level of eccentricity and tangibility that you can bring to your thesis topic and really personalize it to what you're seeking to learn. So the top one on here, comparative analysis of the American and Chilean revolutions, happened to be one of our students from Chile who was really curious about this, having taken some classes on US history in the MLA, wanted to then compare to the revolution in his home country. Economic survival of small Chicago area farmers during COVID-19 was a project during the pandemic that a student wanted to explore because they were looking at these issues and they wanted to bring academic rigor to it. And then using poetry as a leadership training device was used by someone who does a lot of leadership training and wanted to be able to bring that back to their work. And so it can be a personal interest, it can be a professional, it can be a mix of the two. It's really your way of bringing together all of the learning you've done in a place that's meaningful and that you are interested in for your own reasons. In terms of what happens in our classrooms, we're proud about what we consider to be a very distinctive UChicago experience. We have extraordinary faculty who are skilled facilitators. Yes, they are receiving awards for their knowledge, but we really prioritize for the MLA people that are excellent teachers and they know how to facilitate a classroom of experienced individuals where most of the wisdom is one another. And the faculty members there to guide it, but you're really drawing on all of the wisdom in the room. Classes are remote except for our residential seminar, which I'll talk about, but they are synchronous. So this is not where you're going to be watching videos. You're going to be an active participant. We do have classrooms where everyone's expected to have their camera on and to be a full part of the discussion and the seminar. We really pride ourselves, as you probably know, at the university of being a place where we vigorously exchange ideas. We believe that it is actually a really positive attribute if a classroom has strong disagreement in it, because it means you get to be challenged and that makes your ideas better. And so we're a place where we really encourage civil, but frank and candid dialogue and debate. And I'll just say again, we're very fortunate in the MLA in particular to have the absolute best faculty of the university who are also extremely dedicated teachers and love engaging with lifelong learners. In terms of an opportunity, if you do end up getting into the MLA and pursuing it, while this is online, we do have what's called our residential seminar every autumn and every spring. And that's where you come in person, and over the course of a week, you complete an entire class. And the goal of that is that we want you to still feel deeply connected to the university. We work very hard to make sure that's possible as an online student, but we know that some experiences on campus over the course of your degree are going to make you even more integrated with the university, its culture, and its ideas. And so over a week, you have a course that's typically about 25 to 30 hours of contact time during that week. Plus, we put a lot of activities around it so you get to engage with the full intellectual environment of the university. I should emphasize that, especially for students who may be a little intimidated to come back to school later in life after maybe 20 or 30 years of being out of the classroom, at least as a student, we have a lot of support to make sure that you're successful. The number one is that we have academic advising to help you think through your curriculum. This is very personalized. We want you to really be able to follow your desired line of thought. We have a dedicated writing advisor. She works with everyone, especially on your capstone, but also for coursework. And she's been viewed as one of the best writing specialists of all time. And I will let Beth speak to this because I'm sure, Beth, you must have worked with her. She really helps students to get their writing to a level that is sharp and that is distinctive. And especially in a world where technology can do so much, I think she adds a lot of really unique value in being a critical eye on a lot of what you'll do. You have access to the library. Now, that may seem like, well, if I'm not in the Chicago area, how useful is it? Actually, almost all of the library's resources now are online. And especially like access to journals and information, you get the full access because you get all of the passwords and then you can actually access it via the web, but you can also leverage a specialist. So the library has individuals that you can reserve time with to help partner with you in your exploration. And all of those appointments can be set up virtually as well. So we have lots of students that actively use this without ever touching foot in the library physically. As I'm sure you know, we have a vibrant alumni network, and then we have lots of events for MLA students. But rather than me tell you all about this, we have again here two experts that know a lot more. And so, Beth, I want to start with you. Can you describe the educational experience of the MLA? What was it like to be back in the classroom after just a few years away? What would you say you felt in terms of the burden of how was the writing? How was the support that you received? And how much work was this? Was this manageable? So just give us a kind of
Sure.
snapshot of your experience as a student along the way.
Yeah, it was, first of all, the support of the team is just, you can't, never seen anything like it. I mean, in terms of the team here on the call today, just there to help you throughout the process and go, like you said, I've been out of school for some time, and I was at first a little bit, I was apprehensive about, not speaking up necessarily, but okay, am I going to have the right questions and all that? But very quickly, the professors, he mentioned about the professors. I mean, it's world-class conversation, but you also feel very comfortable jumping right in, and they make you feel comfortable. In terms of the workload, very manageable. There's reading and prep, and everybody comes to class kind of prepared, so it's really good, rigorous conversation. But it was not burdens. I mean, first of all, I was so excited about it and so interested in it, so I think that's part of it. But it wasn't too much because I was working and also doing it. I took sometimes one or two classes. I also did the residential seminar where I went to on campus for a week doing digital ethics. But as you mentioned, the library for my thesis, I was able to just send some questions over. Then they sent me just a ton of materials that I needed and support in that process and the writing, as I developed my capstone project. So it was kind of across the board, pushed me, outside my comfort zone. I think that's what's important, and that's was the value in it. And like the concept of I mentioned deep, reading differently and thinking differently, but the professor, always felt, and not just the professors, but also the other participants in class. There was not, I never felt like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. People were very supportive along the process of, especially as in the first class, the first class or so to get going and kind of get my feet wet.
Well, so, and Tim, can we come to you? You've seen scores of classrooms. Can you talk about what you think makes the MLA experience distinctive?
I think the answer is something that's already been spoken to a little bit, which is the Socratic seminar. There's almost no lectures in the MLA. So in our classrooms, MLA students, they're not passive recipients of understanding from the faculty, but they're genuinely that they're co-creators in the process through the Socratic seminar. The classes meet live, and the classes are kept deliberately small. We cap them at 20 students, but more commonly a dozen or 13 is a typical enrollment in a class. And in that environment, the students learn just as much from each other as they do from one another. Um, we have a very diverse student body coming from different backgrounds and professions, different prior trainings, different parts of the country and the globe. And all of those different perspectives are leveraged in whatever conversation is happening for the topic at hand in the classroom. So the spirit of joint inquiry is a phrase that I think captures that dynamic perfectly. As you mentioned, Seth, there's disagreement in class when you discuss big ideas. Of course, there's going to be disagreement, but that disagreement is done collegially, and more importantly, it's done productively. And it's a special dynamic, and it's one of the reasons why the faculty are just as eager to be in the room and be a part of that conversation as the students are.
Okay, so a power round question here, because I know we want to get to the questions from the audience. But Beth, let's start with you. Was it intimidating to be at the University of Chicago? I think that is sometimes a little bit of a, challenge for people to say, am I going to fit into this culture?
Yeah, and I live in Chicago, so I'd had the opportunity to come to speakers and on campus down at Gleacher or down in Hyde Park. So I had a connection to it, maybe just right at first, but not long term. So I mean, it's the vibrancy of the community is one of the best parts of the whole thing, and staying connected to it. I mean, now the Graham School puts on programs, I think, online and also in person. And so I think I was more excited about the process of being part of the vibrant learning community than necessarily. I mean, it was maybe in that first class I was like, oh, can I do this? But it very quickly went away. But no, I think I thought of that as a positive just because I'd had so much interaction with the university and it was being part of something special, which is exactly what it is.
And Tim, not to pick your favorite children here, but what resources do you think are most helpful for our students when they're in the MLA?
The academic advising that you mentioned earlier is sort of top of the list. And that's both to make sure students are enrolling in the type of classes that both meet degree requirements, but also sort of satisfy whatever curiosity brought them into the program to begin with. But that also includes the more mundane things. We make sure our students are on top of different administrative requirements and deadlines and that sort of thing. And I think just broadly, everybody involved in this program, program staff, the faculty themselves, and the students are deeply committed to the student success. I mean, the students are cheering each other on just as much as the staff and the faculty are. And then I just have to double tap your comment earlier about the writing advisor. Millie's an extraordinary writing advisor. And in fact, the title writing advisor doesn't really begin to scratch the surface of what Millie does for our students. I've heard her say that writing is not just nouns and verbs in the right order on the page, but writing is thinking. And so when Millie works with our students on writing their papers, she's really also sort of an academic thought coach as well. Millie is just another example of everyone in this program being deeply committed to student success.
Well, we are going to come back to Tim and Beth when we come to the Q&A. We have one final section to get through, and I'm going to turn it over to my wonderful colleague, Carrie, who can walk us through the timeline and details. And I'll share my screen, Carrie, while you get started.
Great, thanks, Seth. So in terms of timeline, our next application due date is in September. Seth, if you want to advance to the next
Yep,
slide.
there we go.
Autumn application deadline is September 2nd. And I know that sounds really far away, but we'll get into the details in just a moment of the application process. You'll see there's quite a few steps. So right now is actually the best time to get started with that. And first day classes will be September 28th. So digging into some of the different aspects of the application process, first is we do request to review a writing sample from you of at least 5 pages. And most of our applicants submit something that they have already written, either in an academic environment or in a professional setting. So maybe there is a report that you recently wrote for work. We're happy to take a look at your writing sample before you submit it to your application and provide you feedback on if that writing sample will work or if you should maybe create something net new. When applicants have needed to create something new for us, a lot of times they might write a review of a movie they saw or a play that they recently attended and use that for this. With the candidate statement, any time that you saved repurposing a writing sample, we really ask you to focus that in and take a lot of time and be very intentional with your candidate statement. This is such an important part of the application because it really helps us understand your motivations for wanting to take part in our community here. So please be very intentional with that piece. We do require 2 letters of recommendation. Start having those conversations now. That's usually the final piece we're waiting on in the application process. So starting to make those requests right now is actually a good time to do that. You'll need to submit transcripts from any institution that you have attended, a copy of your resume or CV. Some people may need to submit English proficiency scores. This is just for those who maybe English hasn't been your primary language since childhood, or you attended schools that English wasn't the primary language. If you're uncertain if this applies to you, reach out to us and we'll be happy to talk to you about that. There is a application fee. And then once you submit your application, there is also an interview as a part of this process. where you will meet with us and just talk to us a little bit more about your motivations and maybe clarify any questions we might have had after reviewing your application. So moving on, if you're admitted to the program, tuition for the next academic year is going to be $4,480 per course. Based on that, for this academic year, full tuition would be just over $40,000. We do have merit scholarships available that you can apply for during the application process to help you with that expense. And we're really excited to announce that this autumn we're launching a new named scholarship. It's the Mary Eveline Wagner Scholarship Fund. Mary was incredibly generous. She was someone who was just truly passionate about intellectual growth for adult learners, and we're so happy to make this scholarship available for our community. Students can also explore loans if needed. If you want to be considered for a federal and subsidized loan, you do need to be taking 2 to 3 courses per quarter. For students that are taking 1 course per quarter, which is really the majority of our MLA students, since they are also most times working adults, you can also look at private loans. The institution has just rolled out on the financial aid website a list of preferred private loan vendors. This is in no way loan vendors that provide a kickback to the institution, but we've been receiving a lot of questions from prospective students around who might be a trusted option for private loans. So it's really just intended to be a helpful resource to you. You are not required to use one of them. With the university, will work with any private loan vendor that you're interested in, but really we're just trying to provide a helpful resource for you as you consider that. And then we strongly encourage all of our prospective students to talk to your employer. A lot of employers have really generous tuition reimbursement benefits. And as you've heard over the course of this conversation, there's a number of ways that the MLA can help grow you as a leader and really provide long-term benefit to you in your career.
And with that, we are ready for your questions. So let me encourage you to ask questions in one of 3 ways. You can raise your physical hand because we can see you in our room here. You can actually just put it into the chat, or you can raise your virtual hand if you go to the bottom of your screen. And if you click on the React tab, you can then raise your hand that way. And so with that, let me open it up to questions and make sure that we've set it up so that everyone can unmute themselves at this point. Perfect. You should be able to. What questions do you have? Yeah, can you please confirm whether the interview will consist of 2 separate rounds? One with the program director and one with an MLA, or no, so it's 1 interview together. Yeah, you're only suspected to 1 interview. There will be 2 people in the room with you when you interview.
Arnon's raising his hand, Seth.
Yes,
Oh
I have a
yeah,
question for
Arnon.
you.
Yeah, hello. Nice
Hey,
to see you
Seth, how
again.
are you?
I'm good.
Beth, question for you. How did you choose between the MLA and other opportunities to do other
Yeah,
programs like at the University of Chicago? You have a couple of other options.
I can share that. And they're washing the windows, so I hope that's not too loud. Just started it. Yeah, I looked at across the board. I went a path where I was looking at EDD programs. But I had met Tim back in like 2018, a really long time ago, through just hearing about it and reading about it. And like I mentioned, going to different sessions through the university, and most specifically through across the university. So it was that connection. And like I said, did a lot of research and and when we had information sessions in person. And had the opportunity to just stay in touch. So, and I made the decision also when I, kind of ruling out the EDD, which felt more corporate and more connected to my kind of past experience. that the draw of this was that it was something more. I could have a journalism degree than an MBA that really kind of tied back to something kind of more toward the curiosity and love of learning. So that's how I made the decision. But I did look at a lot of different things. In fact, I even went in person and looked at different programs across the country. So
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks, Hernan. Other questions? Well, this will be rare because when you're in classrooms in the MLA, you will find that there is never a quiet moment.
hey,
But
Seth, can I think something I
yeah,
thought of that I didn't touch on during my thesis process, which I taught, which I kind of as you're going into that process, you're like, oh, I have to do this big thesis, and the fact that it was a special project, and I just want to call out the support that I also received from the professor that was my advisor or my advisor, who was also my professor. Just that kind of was just a great experience throughout as I was working on that. So just the level of the connection to the professors, back to your question as well, is that you're working directly with full professors who are experts in their field, and they just the process and learning from your colleagues in the class as well. That was just I didn't mention that. I just thought about that after I spoke. So I just wanted to call that out before we got off the phone today, or got off today.
we got a question in the chat about whether or not your undergraduate transcript is taken into account. They say that they were not able to show their best in those years, but they've had a lot of professional experience since. And the answer to that is we do take very seriously your experience. And the longer it's been since undergrad, the more your experience is what counts. So, we do want to understand your academic background. We do want to make sure that we are confident you will thrive in the classroom, but we take experience very seriously and see that as absolutely a meaningful explanation and demonstration of your capabilities. We have another question. Are there projects that need to be completed with a group that can be challenging due to different schedules? Beth, do you want to talk about any collaborative work that you may have been involved in? And then Tim, it's a very collaborative program in that you're in seminar, you're constantly talking with one another. You're often presenting your papers and ideas in a workshop model where other classmates are critiquing. But to my knowledge, there's actually very few projects that you do in teams. Beth and Tim jump in and correct me on those fronts.
Yeah, no, I don't. I'm just actually stopping to think about that. I don't think there were any in the side. There were some where we had to, like you mentioned, in class. You didn't have to set up time outside of class, which I know can be hard. Going back to my MBA, but you didn't. I mean, you did like joint, like that. You came together in class, like you do it, your part of it, and then you'd present your section of something. But it wasn't a collaborative meeting outside of class situation. But like you said, there's a lot of collaboration in how you talked about different things in class. And there's an opportunity where I took another class outside in booth that was another thing you can do too. You can take classes if approved across the university. And there were some projects in that class we came into the classroom and did, but that was different. But on just the straight Graham School ones, we didn't do outside class work, but you could. The other side of it is that we didn't talk about is that you get to be friends with the people in the classroom too, because you have discussion posts sometimes in some classes where so you get to know people, and then in the class conversations as well. And then I have friends that I still stay in touch with.
Arnon asks, I know the program is very flexible. What's the average course load, one course per quarter? That is the average, but because people are in very different places, it's a wide range. And I mean, in terms of degree completion, it ranges from people completing as quickly as 1 year, which is rare. It requires 3 per quarter, right? That's someone who's really doing it full time, even though that's not the original intent of the degree, all the way over to people at 5 years who are taking 1 to 2 courses a year, potentially autumn, spring, and really allowing themselves to, savor every moment and then focus presumably on their executive roles. So that's the range. The average, though, does lead to about 1 course per quarter. So people are typically completing over a 2 to 3 year horizon. 3 hours of class time per week for the 10 weeks of the academic quarter. There's typically 3 quarters where people take classes, although summer does have opportunities, but there's less of them. And then in terms of the outside classroom time, we typically say that you have about as much work outside class as in class. So if you think about that, it's 6 hours total time commitment in a week that you're in the quarter, 3 of them in a class and 3 of them reading, preparing papers, and doing other work for it.
Yeah, that's a good estimate.
Any other questions? How far into the program do you begin to work on your thesis special project? Tim, do you want to take that? And then maybe we'll hear your experience, Beth.
Yeah, it's traditionally undertaken at the end, but there's no policy that says you have to wait till you finish 8 classes before you start that. But generally, when you're writing your thesis, even if it's specialized in a literature analysis or something, you're drawing on the coursework from earlier on. So it's definitely recommended to wait until toward the end of the program. But if there's a compelling reason why you want to get started earlier, we're happy to work with you.
And the thesis is often done over multiple quarters. So I don't know what the percentage is, Tim, but my sense of meeting a lot of our graduates is that many of them are working on their thesis over a 20 or 30 week period rather than having to feel like they need to finish it in the quarter that they started.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think the thing that took me was narrowing down my idea. I had so many different ideas that I wanted to do. So I think you're right. Like the first quarter, the 1 quarter, I was really kind of narrowing my proposal and coming up with my idea and kind of flushing it out and picking the one I wanted to do. And then just, to quarter and a half, 2 quarter, the 2 quarters to really start writing and working closely with the advisor, that process too, and getting his feedback and incorporating it.
Well, I want to be respectful of time. We typically complete these at the 12:50 moment, so we're coming to that point. Any other questions that you have? And I'll just make the mention that Tom Shannon, who's in the room with us, is our fabulous enrollment counselor. So if you have any personalized questions, he is fully available and eager to answer them. But anything else before we go as a group? All right. Well, can I just say a huge thank you? We're very grateful that you're here. We think it's wonderful that people want to learn primarily for its own sake because they want to deepen their understanding of the world and lead and examine life. And we're thrilled that you're thinking of what we believe is one of the truly great universities to do so at. So thank you for being here. We look forward to continuing the conversation with you as you decide whether to become candidates. And I look forward, if you ultimately become a candidate and succeed, to having you as a member of our school. Thank you again and have a great afternoon all. And thanks, Beth, especially for making the time to join us.
Thanks, everybody. Nice to meet you all.